Get out of this firm. You don't work here anymore, and tell your husband, whoever he is, that no one in this city will touch him after I'm done." She looked at him, not with anger, with something quieter than that. "I understand, Mr. Caldwell," she said. "I'll see myself out." She picked up her bag, plain canvas worn at the corners, and walked to the elevator without looking back. Behind her, the partners' floor of Caldwell and Merritt erupted in low laughter. 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up to the lobby. The man who stepped out was about to do something Warren Caldwell had never once imagined possible. He was going to make him. 2 hours before any of that happened, the evening looked like a triumph. The Caldwell and Merritt Anniversary Gala filled the 42nd floor of One King West in downtown Toronto. Floor-to-ceiling glass, the city spread below like scattered diamonds, Lake Ontario dark and vast beyond it. The firm had rented the entire floor, flown in a string ensemble from Montreal, and commissioned a ice sculpture of the firm's crest that was already beginning to melt at the edges. 300 guests drifted through the room in bespoke suits and cocktail dresses. Judges, senators, Bay Street bankers. The kind of people who know the right restaurants before they open and never wait for a table. Ava Brennan arrived alone. She wore a dark navy blazer over a simple white blouse. No pearls, no statement earrings. Her hair was pulled back the way a woman pulls her hair back when she has somewhere real to be afterward. She looked, to everyone in that room, like a junior associate someone had forgotten to tell not to come. At the coat check, the attendant, a young man barely 20, struggling with a rack of camel wool overcoats, caught a hanger on the rod and sent 6 coats cascading to the floor. He went pale. His hands shook as he scrambled to gather them. Ava was already crouching beside him, lifting coats. "Here!" She sorted them by ticket number without being asked. 44, 45, 46. She held each one up so he could hang them properly. When they finished, she looked at him directly. "You're doing fine. Breath first, then the hanger." He exhaled, nodded. "Thank you, ma'am." She dropped her ticket in the bowl, didn't wait for a receipt, and walked into the gala. She knew the name of the server passing canapes near the window, Felix, who had worked this venue for 11 years and whose daughter had just started at Ryerson. She asked about the daughter. Felix lit up the way a father does when someone actually wants to know. She tipped the bartender before she ordered anything. She stepped aside so an older woman in a walker could get to the window view without threading through the crowd. Nobody noticed. She preferred it that way. Ava had been married to Patrick Brennan for 6 years. She had never told anyone at Caldwell and Merritt the truth about what that meant. Patrick Brennan was not a name that needed announcing in a room like this. It was a name that already owned 2 of the buildings visible from this window. She had kept that quiet deliberately. She wanted to be seen for her work. She wanted the case files to speak before the last name did, and for 6 years that had mostly worked. Tonight was different. Tonight she had been invited as a client referral guest. Patrick's firm held a retainer account with Caldwell and Merritt, and she had come because Patrick asked her to check on a junior associate named Theo, his nephew, who was terrified of the senior partners and needed a friendly face in the room. She found Theo near the bar. He was 26, too tall for his suit, holding his drink with both hands. "They're all watching me," he whispered. "They're not," she said. "They're watching each other. That's what these parties are for." He laughed, surprised. She handed him a glass of water instead of the wine he'd been nursing. "Drink this first. Then say exactly as little as you need to." Around them, the real current of the evening moved underneath the music. She caught it the way she always caught things, quietly, without trying to be caught catching. Caldwell and Merritt was in trouble. She had known this for 4 months, longer than the partners did because Patrick's people had known first. A class action was coming. 3 former associates, all women, 2 of them black, 1 South Asian, had filed separately and were about to consolidate. The firm's insurance exposure was significant. Their litigation reserve was not. And there was something else. A government infrastructure contract. Enormous. Federal. The kind of file that could paper over every other wound if it came through. It was not yet signed. The partner responsible for landing it was Warren Caldwell himself. And the signing authority on the other side, the federal deputy minister who controlled the file, had not yet confirmed attendance tonight. Ava had read all of this in a briefing note Patrick had shown her over coffee that morning. She did not mention any of it. She stood near the window with Theo and watched the room. Near the bar, Warren Caldwell held the center. He was broad-shouldered, silver at the temples, the kind of man who had been the most important person in every room since 1987 and had stopped checking whether that was still true. He shook hands the way you shake hands when you're doing the other person a favor. He laughed too loud at his own observations. The people around him laughed along, a half-beat behind. When his eyes crossed Ava's, they did what powerful men's eyes do when they see a woman they cannot immediately categorize. They assessed, then dismissed. She felt it. She had felt it many times. She turned back to Theo. Warren's wife, Sandra Caldwell, materialized beside Ava 20 minutes later. Sandra wore green, real emerald, not the department store version, and had the particular pochotter of a woman who has spent 30 years being the most decorative person in a room and resents anyone who doesn't appreciate the effort. She looked at Ava's blazer the way you look at a scratch on a new car. "Are you one of the juniors?" she asked. "No," Ava said. "I'm a client guest." Sandra's smile sharpened slightly. "Of course. Well," she let her gaze travel over Ava's blouse, slowly, the way it was meant to be felt. "It's such a casual look for a firm event." She moved on before Ava could respond. Theo had seen it. He started to say something. Ava shook her head. "Not tonight. Tonight's not the night." She checked her phone once, read a message, slid it back into her blazer pocket. Whatever the message said, her shoulders settled a fraction. She knew something the room didn't. The ice sculpture kept melting. The quartet played Sondheim. The city glittered below, and Warren Caldwell began walking toward her. He crossed the room with the deliberate pace of a man who has decided to make a point. He brought two of his equity partners with him, Martin Folds and Christine Yee, not because he needed them, but because an audience improves the performance. He stopped in front of Ava with his drink at chest height and a smile spotted that did not reach past his cheekbones. "I don't think we've met formally," he said. "Ava Brennan." She offered her hand. He shook it briefly, the way you shake hands with someone you've already categorized. "Patrick Brennan's wife," he said. "Yes, I thought so." Something shifted in the air. Folds and Yee exchanged a glance. "That was not the way you say a person's name when you respect the person it belongs to." "We appreciate Patrick's business," Warren continued. "We do." He tilted his head, studied her like an artifact he was deciding whether to bid on. "But I'll be honest, I've never quite understood why he sends you to these things." "I come because I want to," she said. "Of course," he smiled. "Do you work in some capacity?" "I do." "What field?" "Administrative," she said, which was true in the way that an ocean is technically a puddle of water. Warren nodded slowly, performing a thought. "I ask because, and I mean this constructively, these events have a particular purpose. Relationships, deals, serious conversations." He spread one hand gently. "It's not the right environment for someone who isn't. How do I put this embedded in the professional community?" Theo had gone very still beside her. "I appreciate the concern," Ava said. Warren wasn't finished. "No, I think you should hear this. Because Patrick is a valued relationship, and I'd hate for that to become awkward." He looked at her blazer. "You understand that how a person presents reflects on their associate. When a client guest arrives dressed like they're attending a staff training." "I can leave," Ava said, "if you'd prefer." "That would probably be for the best." He said it pleasantly, genuinely pleasantly. The way you say it when you believe it. "There's a Starbucks in the lobby. You could wait for him there." 3 guests nearby had stopped pretending to talk about other things. 2 of them had drinks held low. The posture of people recording without wanting to be seen recording. Ava looked at Warren Caldwell. She looked at him long enough that he almost filled the silence himself. Almost. "Thank you for the suggestion," she said. She turned and walked toward the windows, not toward the exit. Warren watched her, satisfied, already rotating back to Martin and Christine, with the expression of a man who has handled something. He hadn't handled anything. He found her again 30 minutes later. This time he had a full audience. He had told the story. The little story of the wife in the navy blazer who didn't know her place, and the laughter had encouraged him. Several partners had drifted toward the windows with him, not because they were interested in the view. He tapped Ava on the shoulder. "Still here," he said. "Still here," she confirmed. He looked at Theo. "You should probably tell your uncle that his wife is making things uncomfortable." Theo's jaw tightened. "I'll pass that along." Warren turned back to Ava. "Look, I've tried to be gracious about this, but you're at a professional event for a firm you have no professional relationship with. The fact that Patrick holds an account with us doesn't entitle you to floor access like a colleague." He paused for effect. "You're a spouse," respectfully. Ava said nothing. He leaned in slightly. "I've built this firm from the ground up. 40 years. Do you understand what that means? The clients in this room, the judges, the work we do. It has a standard. And that standard means not everyone gets to stand in every room." "I didn't know there was a test," she said. He smiled. "There's always a test." He raised his voice then, not shouting, but the particular raise of a man who wants an audience to understand he's concluding something. "My assistant will return your coat. I think it's time for you to go wait for your husband somewhere more appropriate." Several heads turned. Christine Yee had gone quiet. Felix, the server, had slowed near the wall. He looked at Ava with an expression she recognized, the expression of someone watching something wrong happen and calculating the cost of saying so. She gave him the smallest shake of her head. "Not yet." She looked at Warren. "You know what's interesting," she said. "I've been in this room for 2 hours. I've watched how you speak to the servers, how you speak to the junior associates, how you speak to women you've decided aren't worth the full version of your manners." She paused. "It's very useful information." Warren's smile thinned. "Is that supposed to mean something?" "It will," she said. "Probably quite soon." He stared at her, then he laughed. The short, contemptuous kind that means he hadn't understood the warning at all. He turned away. That was when Sandra Caldwell appeared at his elbow and made the mistake. She had come from the bar with a fresh glass of red. She saw Ava standing by the window, in the navy blazer, in the middle of what was clearly a winning situation for Warren, and something in her decided to contribute. She stepped in front of Ava. She let the wine glass tip, not entirely by accident. Just enough. A long arc of merlot hit the front of Ava's white blouse. Sandra gasped first, then covered her mouth. Oh, how clumsy of me." She looked at the stain spreading across the white fabric. "I'm so sorry. Though I suppose it doesn't matter much, does it, with what you were wearing?" The room heard that. The room was meant to hear it. Ava looked down at the stain. She looked up at Sandra, and then she did something Sandra had not expected. She smiled. It was not a wounded smile. It was the precise, patient smile of a woman who has just been handed something she can use. She pulled a handkerchief from her blazer pocket, pressed linen, her initials in the corner, and touched it once to the stain. Then she slipped it back into her pocket and looked out the window at the street below. A black SUV had just turned into the King Street driveway. Warren was mid-sentence to Martin Folds when his assistant Rachel appeared at his arm. She was pale. "Sir, not now, Rachel. Sir, there's someone in the lobby. He's asking for Mrs. Brennan." Warren glanced toward Ava with something between irritation and amusement. "Tell whoever it is to wait on the street." Rachel swallowed. "Sir, I think you should come down." The way she said it made Martin Folds put down his drink. Warren crossed the floor to the window and looked down at the lobby entrance, 42 floors below. Even from that height, you could see the man coming through the front doors. Plain dark coat, moving the way a man moves when no one has ever told him to wait. Rachel's radio crackled. The colors left her face. "Sir," she said. The lobby is saying that's Douglas Mercer." Martin Folds turned. "What?" "Rachel," Warren said slowly. "What did you just say?" She said it again. "Douglas Mercer, Deputy Minister of Infrastructure. Federal Government. The contract." Warren's smile did not fall off his face all at once. It dissolved, slowly, from the corners inward, because Warren Caldwell understood what everyone in Bay Street understood about Douglas Mercer. He controlled the federal infrastructure contract worth $2.3 billion. The contract the firm had been positioning for 18 months to win. The contract on which, frankly, the next 5 years of Caldwell and Merritt's future rested. He was the one person in the country whose opinion of this firm mattered more, tonight, than every judge and senator in that room combined. And no one had told Warren he was coming. 60 seconds later, the elevator opened and Douglas Mercer walked onto the 42nd floor. He was older, late 60. He wore a plain dark coat, no tie, no cufflinks, nothing that announced him. He had the eyes of a man who has spent 40 years watching other men perform and has long since stopped being impressed by the show. He crossed the room without pausing. He didn't look at the ice sculpture or the string quartet or the city below. He looked at Ava. He walked to her. He put a hand on her arm. "You all right?" She looked at him with a steadiness that answered the question better than any words. "I'm fine, Dad. I appreciate you coming." The word landed in the silence of the room the way a stone drops into still water. Dad. 300 people processed that word in the same half-second. Ava Brennan, née Mercer, daughter of Douglas Mercer. The man who had spent 2 hours being managed out of a room was the man whose daughter controlled access to the most significant government contract any firm in that building had ever chased. Douglas looked at the stain on her blouse. His face did not change. It simply became very still in the way a room becomes still before a serious conversation. He turned to Warren. Warren had not moved. He was standing 4 feet away, drink in hand, doing the mathematics in real time. "You're Warren Caldwell," Douglas said. It was not a question. "I am," Warren said. "And I—" He stopped himself. Started again. "Mr. Mercer." "Douglas, I had no idea. We had no idea you were coming this evening. If we had known, we would have—" "You weren't meant to know," Douglas said. He said it with the same flat calm that Ava had been using all night. "I wanted to see your firm the way it is, when you believe no one important is in the room." The room had gone entirely quiet. The quartet had stopped, not on cue, just organically, the way music stops when something more serious begins. Warren's mouth worked. "Mr. Mercer, I assure you that what happened tonight was—" "I heard it," Douglas said. "The windows were open. I was in the lobby for nearly 20 minutes before I came up." He looked at Warren steadily. "I heard you send my daughter to wait in a Starbucks." In the silence, someone near the bar set down their glass very carefully. Warren's throat moved. There was clearly a misunderstanding about who. "There wasn't," Douglas said, "because you didn't know who she was. And that's exactly the point." He reached into his coat pocket and took out his phone. He did not raise his voice. He did not look around for an audience. He simply looked at the phone the way you look at something you've decided, and dialed. "It's Douglas," he said when the call connected. "The Caldwell and Merritt contract. Infrastructure package. I need you to put a hold on the file tonight. Full review." "Yes, I'll confirm in the morning." He hung up. Warren Caldwell's knees did not give way dramatically. He didn't fall, but the life went out of him in a way that was worse than falling. He sat down in the nearest chair. A catering chair, canvas and aluminum. And he sat in it the way a man sits when he realizes the ground has changed under his feet and there is nothing to grip. The ice sculpture, which had been melting steadily all night, chose this moment to shed a piece of itself onto the tray below with a sharp crack. Nobody laughed. Sandra stood with the empty wine glass still in her hand. She looked at Ava, and Ava looked back at her, and there was a long moment of 2 women understanding something clearly that would never need to be said aloud. Douglas spoke to no one else that night. He put Ava's coat around her shoulders. He had thought to bring it from the coat check, because he was that kind of father, and walked with her and Theo to the elevator. Theo was quiet until the elevator closed. Then he said, "Did you know he was coming?" "I asked him to," she said. She paused. "Not to do that, just to come." She looked at the stain on her blouse. The rest was his decision. Douglas said nothing. He looked at the elevator buttons the way a man looks at something when he doesn't need to say what he's thinking. When they reached the lobby, the coat check attendant, the young man with the shaking hands, saw them coming and had Ava's bag ready before she reached the counter. "You have a good night, ma'am," he said. "You too," she said. She meant it. By morning, the footage was everywhere. 300 guests, more than half of them with phones. The clips went up before the gala even ended. Sandra's wine, Douglas's arrival, the phone call, Warren in the canvas chair. Someone had captured the moment. Douglas said the word "Dad" and the subsequent silence across 3 separate angles. By 9 a.m., the story had made every major Canadian outlet: The Globe, The Star, CBC, BNN, Bloomberg. The headline was largely the same across all of them. Senior partner expels client's wife from Gala. She was the deputy minister's daughter. By noon, the firm's managing committee had convened. By 2 p.m., Warren Caldwell had been asked to take a leave of absence pending a conduct review. By the closing of markets, 3 corporate clients had sent withdrawal notices. 2 others had requested urgent meetings with partners who were not Warren Caldwell. The federal contract was placed under formal review. It did not die immediately. Government contracts rarely do. But it was no longer Caldwell and Merritt's to lose. It was Caldwell and Merritt's to try to earn back, from scratch, without the man who had cost them it in the first place. Christine Yee, who had stood beside Warren during both confrontations and said nothing either time, gave a statement to the managing committee that was careful and accurate. She had not agreed with what she witnessed. She had said nothing. She named that clearly, without being asked, as a failure she would carry. Martin Folds did not give a similar statement. The three former associates who had filed discrimination claims, their cases, which had been moving slowly through the courts, were suddenly moving faster. 3 additional women contacted the tribunal in the week that followed. The law firm representing them noted publicly that the footage had made certain arguments considerably easier to make. Caldwell and Merritt settled with all 6 within 8 weeks. The terms were sealed. The apologies were not. They were filed with the Law Society, and the terms of redress were read into the public record. For a firm built on its reputation, the reading was its own kind of reckoning. Sandra Caldwell issued a written apology for the wine, filed after her own counsel reviewed the footage and confirmed what her counsel had already told her privately, which was that there was no version of this that benefited from a contest. The apology used the words deliberate and without justification and was read at a law society proceeding in a room considerably smaller than the 42nd floor of 1 King West. Warren's clubs did not renew his memberships. The speaking invitations stopped. The charity board seats, he held 4, received politely worded requests for his resignation. The name Caldwell, which had been above the door for 38 years, was quietly under discussion by the remaining equity partners. Some wanted it gone. Some felt removing it was performative. The discussion continued for months and settled nothing. Warren himself gave no interviews. He moved through the weeks after with the particular quietness of a man who has run out of narrative. The story he had told himself, that he was the builder, the standard setter, the reasonable steward of a serious institution, had been caught on 17 different phones from 17 different angles and played back at full resolution to anyone who wanted to see it, which turned out to be a great many people. He started once to draft a message to Ava. He got 3 sentences in and stopped. Some part of him understood that the only apology worth anything was the one that had needed to come while she was still standing in his building, in the wine on her blouse, asking only to be left in peace. That moment was gone. The message stayed in drafts. Ava gave no interviews. She returned to her actual work, which was considerable and entirely unrelated to anything that had happened on the 42nd floor of 1 King West. She answered no media requests, posted nothing, and when a journalist camped outside her building, left a voicemail for the 3rd time. She had her assistant call back and ask very politely whether the journalist would like a coffee while she waited, because the answer would be no comment, but that didn't mean anyone needed to stand in the cold. Her silence was, in the end, the most effective statement she could have made. She had never needed the room to know who she was. She had shown up in a navy blazer and asked about Felix's daughter and tipped the bartender first, and all of that had been true before Douglas Mercer stepped out of the elevator. It remained true after. The stain came out of the blouse. Good fabric usually does, Patrick said, when she got home that night and told him what had happened. Only one thing. "I'm sorry I wasn't there." "You chose to stay home with the kids?" she said. "That's not something to be sorry about." He looked at her for a moment. "I'm going to call Douglas tomorrow and thank him. He'll tell you he only came to say hello," she said. And Patrick laughed, because he knew Douglas Mercer, and he knew that was exactly what Douglas would say. Douglas made one public comment, a single one, to a reporter who caught him outside his department's building on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks later. "Did you intend for the evening to unfold the way it did?" He stopped. He looked at the camera with the same patience he'd had in that room, the patience of a man who has never needed to perform certainty because he actually has it. "My daughter," he said, "spent 6 years working in a field where people treated her seriously on her own merit. She didn't want my name attached to that work. She earned what she built." He paused. What happened that night was what happens when people confuse a person's presentation for their value. "I didn't plan anything. I came to say hello to my daughter. What I found when I got there was simply what was there." He looked at the reporter evenly. "The only thing I did was let it be seen." Then he continued down the sidewalk and did not stop again. The clip went around the country by dinner. Someone transcribed it and put it on a card. Someone else made it the caption on a photo of Ava from a conference she had spoken at 2 years earlier, before any of this, where she was standing at a podium in the same kind of plain blazer, mid-sentence, entirely unaware of being photographed. She looked exactly like herself, Caldwell and Merritt did not dissolve. Firms like that rarely do. It restructured. The senior partnership changed, the name changed, the conduct policy changed. A real one, written by outside counsel, with actual mechanisms for accountability and an anonymous reporting structure that the previous version had lacked. The reforms had a cost. The cost had a face. His name had been above the door for 38 years. And somewhere in a quieter office than the one he'd had, Warren Caldwell sat with the muted television and watched a clip of himself he could not unsee. The city below, the wine stain, the canvas chair, the woman in the navy blazer who had not once raised her voice. He had believed he was protecting a standard. That was the part that stayed with him the longest. Not the public consequences, not the contract, not even the vote that removed him. It was the simpler thing. He had looked at Ava Brennan in the room he built and decided, without asking, without pausing, that she did not belong in it, and the only person who had not belonged in that room was him. 6 months later, almost nothing about Ava had changed. She still drove the same car, a 7-year-old Volvo with a cracked console she kept meaning to fix. She still wore blazers. She still asked servers their names. She still knew at every event she attended which person in the room was the most tired and made a point of talking to them first. The money, the name, the access, it had all been there her whole life. She had simply never needed it to know who she was. Theo sent her a text on the anniversary of the gala. Just one line, "I spoke up at a meeting today." First time. It felt right. She wrote back, "Good, keep going." She had never needed a ballroom reveal to prove anything. She had needed, for a few hours on a Tuesday night, for someone to simply let things be what they were. And now everyone knew. Here's what I keep thinking about. The story you just heard didn't happen to Ava in a courtroom or a boardroom or anywhere people expect justice to have an address. It happened at a party, with canopies and a string quartet, and people who thought they were the protagonists. And most of the time, there's no deputy minister pulling up in an SUV. There's no phone call that freezes a contract. The Ava in most versions of this story goes home, changes her blouse, and tells her husband what happened over leftover dinner, and he listens, and that's all there is. So the question was never really about Warren Caldwell. The question was about the 300 people in that room, the ones who watched, the ones who looked away, the ones who calculated the cost of saying something and decided it was too high, because those people exist in every room. In your office, at your family dinner, at a counter where someone is being spoken to in a tone that says the speaker has already decided who they're dealing with. The moment that actually matters in this story is not Douglas Mercer walking off the elevator. It's the server, Felix, slowing down by the wall, watching, doing the math. That's the part we actually get to choose. So I want to ask you, and I want you to actually think about this before you answer, if you had been standing in that room before anyone knew who Ava was, what would you have done? Not what you wish you would have done. What you actually would have done. Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and if this story sat with you, share it with someone who needs it. Like it if the question is worth asking. Subscribe to Velvet Honor, because we tell the stories where the quiet ones turn out to be carrying everything. The richest person in any room is almost never the loudest one. Sometimes it's the woman in the navy blazer who knows everyone's name and never once needed you to know hers.